To get started on this exercise, you should have downloaded the button animation resource file, and you can open up the After Effects file that's inside of this to get this thing started. Once it's open, do make sure you're working in the button composition, which should have all of your layers nice and ready to set up. If you need to, we can also zoom in so that we can see the download button portion at the very bottom of this a little bit better. The first thing we need to do is to go down to the bottom and look in our layers panel, and let's turn off visibility for the text layer as well as the rounded rectangle layer. The first thing we're going to animate is the size of the little circle kind of popping up. So again, make sure you've got your circle layer selected. Type the S key on your keyboard to open up the scale options, and let's scrub through and set the scale value initially all the way down to 0. Since it's a little bit easier, I'm going to type it in. We can start this animation at frame 0, so I'm going to click on the stopwatch for the scale to add a keyframe. Let's move forward to the 10th keyframe. Then we can bring up the scale, and we're going to overshoot it by 120%. This will make it larger than necessary. And then let's go forward to the 20th keyframe and have it come back down to 100%. As with all of these, we can select them, hit F9 to easy ease those in and out, and if we test our keyframe, this is what it looks like. Now let's do the same thing for the arrow. We're going to return our current time indicator back to 0 frames, select the arrow layer and press the S key. This will bring up scale. What we want to do is to highlight and select all 3 of our keyframes from the circle layer, and then we can copy them by doing Command C or going up to Edit and Copy. Then turn on the scale for the arrow layer, and with the arrow layer selected, we can Command V to paste those frames into there as well. Now when we play, both the arrow and the circle animate up together. In addition to the scaling up, we want this arrow to rotate and kind of wiggle into place as it comes to the stopping point. So with the arrow layer still selected, do Shift R to open up the rotation properties. There it is. Make sure your current time indicator is still back at 0 frames. And let's set our current initial rotation to be at -180. Do make sure you've got -180 set for the starting point for it. Now to give it the wiggle effect, we can turn on our rotation keyframe to start at frame number 1. Then let's move to frame number 15. And we're going to have it rotate the other way and overshoot by just a bit. So we're going to set our rotation to a +10. Then we can move to frame number 20 as it settles down and do -10. Then move to frame 25 and set it at 5, +5. Then finally end at 1 second as a -5. And then, this will be the final one. 1 second and 5 frames. It'll land back at 0 with the rotation property to have it fully placing straight down. As with the other ones, let's add some easy ease to these. So F9, once you select all of your keyframes. Now when you back up, it has a little wiggle to it. Now let's focus on the text portion of this. We'll return our keyframe indicator to the first keyframe. Let's turn on visibility for the text as well as that rounded rectangle layer too. Now what we want to do first is to animate this blue little rounded rectangle to be coming out from the left to the right hand side, almost like it's coming out of the little circle. The problem with it is, if we were to just do a simple transformation, it's going to scale it in, but it's also going to distort that roundedness to it. What we want to be able to do is to edit the vector path itself. Now, since this design was created in Illustrator, we need to convert this Illustrator layer to a simple shape layer. To do that, I'm going to select the rounded rectangle tool. Then we can go up to Layer, down to Create, and choose Create Shapes from Vector Layer. Notice in the book that this Create Shapes from Layer used to be part of the Layers drop-down menu. It's now nested under the word Create. When you do this, this is going to convert your rounded rectangle layer to a basic shapes layer. Now we actually have two different versions of that layer. One is editable inside of Adobe After Effects, where we can select the individual vector points. Since it's already in its finished location, let's choose this new rounded rectangle outlines layer and move our current time indicator to 1 second. We can then go down and open up the contents of it, choose the contents of group number 1, and what we want to do is to edit the path of this one. So with path number 1 selected, click on the stopwatch to add a keyframe right at 1 second for this rounded rectangle. Now we can back our current time indicator up to the 10th frame, and if you don't see your vector points along this path, click on the word path, and this will highlight all of your vector points. This will also let you use your selection tool to click and drag and select just these 3 points over here. Now that we're on the 10th frame, we can click on these points, hold down Shift, and let's move it all the way back till it lines inside of the circle nicely right there. If we were to go to play it, now you can see it fully extends out this way. As with the others, we can add a easy ease to this one by selecting them and hit F9. Now let's animate the text for the download button. I'm going to close out some of these layers just to make it easier to see and select things. Choose your text layer and let's move our current time indicator to the 20th frame. Since we want this to move into position with the text layer selected, press the P key, and it's already in its final location. So I'm going to choose the stopwatch for the position and set it to be right here. From here, we can back our current time indicator to the 10th frame, and let's set the position's numeric value by bringing it down just a bit. So we're going to change this second value, scrub it this way till it's about 1210. If it's off by a little bit, that's okay. So right about there. So this will move it straight down. As always, let's select our keyframes, apply some easy ease to that. You can see that it moves up into place. Now what we want to do is to have it mask out inside of this rounded rectangle. Luckily, we've got an extra rounded rectangle layer that we can use as a mask. Going down to your layers, select this rounded rectangle layer and let's position it just above your text layer. Next, we need to swap out our modes. So down here at the very bottom, there we go. Swap over so that you can see your track mats. Choose the text layer and make sure your track mat is set to that rounded rectangle that's now on top of it. By default, the alpha mat is the first one that's selected, so we're going to keep that icon on. Now, when we back up, you can see it appears this way. But we still have a little bit of a problem. You'll notice that as it's coming up, it's kind of just coming up out of nothing and the background is appearing. Let's see if we can refine the timing of this by going into our graph editor. With the text layer still open and you can see the positions keyframes, select both of those keyframes and open up your graph editor by clicking on the icon. Next, let's click on the first keyframe Bezier handle and drag it to the right until it creates a steep mountain peak that's closer to this end and looks like this. Now when it plays, it'll go a little bit slower to start off with the download animation. With this done, we can close out our text layer, choose your rounded rectangle outlines layer and press the U key. This will open up the keyframes for your path. And when you click on the word path, you can see it'll open up the graph for that path. For this one, we want it to start off quickly. So let's choose the second Bezier handle and let's drag it closer to this left-hand side to give a curve that looks more like this. Now when we back up, you can see the words and the background appear a little bit better. While we're here, let's see if we can adjust the timing for the circle. We'll close out our rounded rectangle, choose your circle layer, and press the U key. You can then choose the word scale, and now you can see the scale that's happening with this one. Let's choose the first keyframe and drag the left one until the influence is right at 100%, and it creates a steep peak that looks like this. Now when we back up to play it, comes up and looks like that. Very nice. With these refined, we can now close out our little graph by clicking on our graph editor. There's one little final problem. If we scale down, you can see we can see our circle before it actually appears. So we actually need to trim the time for this background rounded rectangle. Set your current time indicator to this 10th keyframe or 10th frame. Let's choose our rounded rectangle outlines layer and hold down the Option if you're on a Mac or Alt if you're on a Windows computer and the Open Bracket key. This will trim your area to start right here. Now when we back up, you can see it's not visible until it reaches that 10th keyframe and comes up nicely. Now, to finish out this exercise, the book wants you to animate this starting at the 2-second mark, have everything close back up and go down. The book won't show you how to do this, and for this one, I'm not going to show it to you either. I want you to experiment with what you know to be able to reverse out this animation and to do so that it resets itself and can loop back over. Remember, start this at the 2-second mark and everything should close up, move out of the way, and scale down. If you want, I've included a finished version of this so that you can see my solution to it, but this doesn't have to be your solution. You can animate this however you choose. Be sure to play around with overshooting or adding extra animation to your design to make it seem a little bit more natural, as well as playing around with the graph editor and the timing of all of these events. Once you're finished, make sure to save your After Effects file. You can go up to File and Export, add it to your render queue, and create your final movie to upload your movie to the Canvas page as well. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.